is actually the second video of the evening I'm making tonight, purely dedicated to news about the Guild Wars franchise, except the previous video was exclusively about Guild Wars 1 stuff, which is so strange to think about, but it's busy on both ends. Guild Wars 1 and 2, there's been a lot of dev posts, comments, clarifications, things upcoming, and even stuff with the recent balance and content patch, including the underwater dive master stuff that I didn't tell you guys about. And particularly, it's related to Heart of Thorns, the Revenant. That's right, the Revenant beta weapons have finally been added. They've been found after all this time, and so we can get in and talk about that, I suppose, first of all. So yeah, I don't think the devs officially announced this, but with the last big patch, if you now look on Wiki, the community's compiled things, it says that a new Mists Traveler has been added to the game. This is a strange, sneaky update. It's this NPC called Zeghai of the Lost, who looks really weird. So Zeghai of the Lost is a mysterious traveler who has walked the mists. Though he has a humanoid silhouette, his skin is black that periodically pulses with a purple hue, leaving his actual race unclear. So, here's a screenshot of the guy's face. It's very strange. Some people think it might be a reference to Thanos and Infinity War and stuff. I don't know, really. But this is a strange race we've never experienced either in Guild Wars 1 or 2. I don't know whether the series will ever actually try to elaborate on what exactly it is, but he seems to be from another world. Could this be the world that the gods have gone to, where the humans originally came from? I don't know. All that speculation is obviously juicy and rampant. He travels a little bit as well, like Baltec did. Another sort of mist traveler, mysterious character from Guild Wars 1. They used to do that around the areas of Istan. And that's funny because I'm expecting one of the Living World updates to take us back to that region of the world soon enough. Anyway, so Zeghai of the Lost is how we get these new weapons. And basically, he travels to different maps at different moments real time. So he will spawn at a new location each hour at 1:15. Then he stays at that location only for a while. At 22 the next hour, he'll disappear. And then you'll only be able to find him again when he's randomly spawned on another new place. So when this guy got added, it took a while for the community to figure it out and actually figure out all the different maps and different places he can be. Because he won't just spawn in cities, he'll spawn well out there in the wilderness. Very similar to, say, Nicholas the Traveler from the original game. So a really cool system. When you get to him each time, he'll have some new recipes for sale. One of 3, I think, and you can pick one. They're not very expensive, but they're ascended recipes to be able to craft, that's right, the Revenant skins. The Mist Breaker, the Mist Render, and the Mist Cleaver. So I think the sword was already, like, re-implemented, maybe. But I think we get the hammer here, we get the mace here, the axe here. I think that's the 3 that we get. But if you've been looking forward to those skins, at last they have arrived. The full story of this was that they were available during the Heart of Thorns betas and then went missing somehow and weren't hooked up as real rewards for the expansion itself. At no point through Season 3 did that happen, despite frequent requests from the player base for it to happen. And now finally here in Season 4, it has suddenly just dropped in. Interesting feature. It also comes with a little bit of weird dialogue, by the way. So you can only buy from him if you're a Revenant, which, first of all, is awesome, or if you have a level 80 Revenant on your account. So, if you're a Rev, when you greet him, he says, "I see you clearly. We have both walked in the mists. We have seen the realm of infinite possibilities and chosen to risk our existence to manipulate them." And we can say, "I seek tools to better channel my powers." Or, if you speak to him and it's at dawn, so you found him at a precise period of time and it's the in-game day-night cycle where it's dawn, he has unique dialogue for that. I wonder whether he has unique dialogue for dusk as well. It's just people haven't found out yet. But he says, "Tyrion fascinates me. Such a rigid place. It moves like a machine. Come, friend, and watch the sunrise with me. Witness this machine in motion." If your other professions, he says, "I can see that you've had close dealings with the mists. Do you wish to learn more?" But that's if you have a level 80 Revenant on your account. And then lastly, if you have no criteria to speak with him at all, he says, "Your mind is closed to the truth. I only speak to those who are familiar with the mists and who know how to manipulate them." So really interesting system. I know a lot of you guys want me to have more lore speculation about who this is, but it really is completely open. He's blue, so he could perhaps be the same race that Dwayna was, could be related to the Harpies before they fell or whatever, but this is the same kind of speculation we've done with any of these random mist travelers, similar to when we talked about the Harbinger from one of the recent fractals and whatnot. If this hooks in even deeper into the story, I'll be surprised. As for me, for now, I'm mostly just excited about the new system that's in the game and a new reward for us to go for. That's great. Also, his gear is the arcane outfit from the gem sword, but again, I don't think it's necessarily related to anything. If you really want to speculate deeply about him, I think the most tangible we've got to go on is his name. Try and find some connection or meaning behind the word Zeghai, and then maybe even the of the lost part. Perhaps he's from the domain of the lost in the realm of torment or something. There's very loose things to hang on to, though. So, that's just the start of the news, though. Let's take a look over at the forums. Now, you'll all recall that very recently we had a lore-based AFC, where many members of the community asked for clarification on various story-related topics. Many posts did get response, and I've already done a very long video discussing that. However, a few weeks after the fact, one dev did go back and answered even more questions. This is long past the point where we, the community, can submit questions or respond to things, but the devs can still post. Now, most of the responses that were dropped were kind of non-answers and saying, hey, we'd love to talk about this, but we can't, or hey, there's not too much going on here, so don't expect any ridiculous bombs. But it was awesome that they went back to do this. So the dev in question was Bobby Stein, gave some clarity and closure on a large variety of topics. I really liked this. When this happened, Reddit noticed, and there was a thread, so Bobby even responded in there. I guess we'll start off with this. There's a comment from this person here, Achillean, who is basically saying, hey, I see that there's a lot of things you don't feel you can answer because it's not relevant to the story. What about that new book UI you added? Can't you use that? And Bobby says, thanks for the kind words. We do have the option to tackle deeper lore with the in-game books. The key would be to resolve those stories internally among ourselves first so that we could write those books in confidence and without the risk that someone on another team would contradict the lore unknowingly. All this is to say, making games with big teams is hard. I really think Achillean is onto something here. That lore book UI is amazing, and being able to dump blocks of text in like that would be so nice for, yeah, some of this really weird tertiary lore that really isn't probably going to become a main series thread or something, especially for old mysterious Guild Wars 1 things that are just hanging around. It'd be so cool if members of the writer team just had that clarity to get in there, write a cool, satisfying, weird little confusion or piece of speculation about it in universe and dump it in with the lore book UI. That would be fantastic. So yeah, that's just sort of ancillary to the actual responses themselves. Let's jump into them now. I'll give you just the best of the best because, as I say, many of Bobby's most recent answers don't really offer us anything. But here's one. Zibbles says, is the full extent of the Guild Wars world known? Is there space for unexplored continents and hitherto unfound island chains? Or have there been extensive efforts to map the unknown by some of the NPCs? If there's still space to explore that is as yet unmapped, any chance of exploring those areas at some point? Bobby simply says, Tyrion hasn't been fully explored by its inhabitants or by its players. We kind of knew this anyway, because the information about the further away reaches of the world, we have so little information, and that just kind of tells the story. But here it is, he's bluntly saying, we don't know. If anyone knows, probably the Dermot Priory does, but even then, it would be largely speculative about those really far-off regions, like Misandry and Foundry and all of that. Next one, personal story cliffhangers. Will they ever get resolved? There are several personal story trees that end in cliffhangers, unresolved. Will we see them addressed in the future? And they give an example there. I can't remember exactly, but that example might be the matter of your Char father. If you play a very specific route through the Char personal story, which, by the way, if I dare plug on my Guild Wars Let's Play, you can check out. There's a big unresolved mystery to do with your father. And they're wondering what happens here. Also, on a broader note, will there ever be branched content again that takes your background and or your race and profession into account so that we will have a variety of paths again that all lead to the same goal? Bobby says, if the continuation or resolution of those stories worked in the broader context of the stories we're telling now, we would consider them. The thing to remember here is scope. All the personal story stuff from level 1 to 30 was race specific, which means 5 times the work. Doing so would have to come at the cost of something else, and since our living world releases have to accommodate players of all races, the chances that we'd focus our energy into a single racist story from the core game are very slim. Which, you know, this answer doesn't give us too much, but it does at least demonstrate they probably thought of stuff like the Char father. There's so many cool places that character could be re-implemented into the game, but it's that thing of, well, that's going to have to be a really big bit of dialogue if you are that specific Char who made that specific choice. It's not even 5 times the work, because most Char won't have even taken that specific story, for example. Same with Malik, right? There's a lot of races out there. Only the Sylvari are likely to know who Malik is, and even then, only a fraction of the Sylvari will have actually done the Where Life Goes arc. So it's kind of difficult, because they have to be very expository about that stuff for all the players who missed out on the original personal story things. Listen, guys, the way that they handled the personal story right at the start was a bit of a nightmare, and it's hard to pay off on that 5 years later. Next, we have another one. Intended versus unintended mysteries. Example, the Wizard's Tower. I know a lot of lorehounds would really like to see an explanation of the Wizard's Tower, but I love the idea that there are some things in game that we'll never know. This one seems like a perfect candidate to leave alone, as I doubt any official explanation will end up being as interesting as reading or hearing players speculate about what it might be. That said, do you all try to include lots of extra conundrums, blah blah blah, and then they link at the bottom, further reading. They even link to our videos on the Wizard's Tower. By the way, I do disagree with this original poster here. I think that the Wizard's Tower can be delivered in a very cool way, but I get their sentiment, and with other areas of the lore and world building, I do understand what they mean. Bobby's response to this is that we always look to see if there are cool story opportunities we can tap into for future content releases. Sometimes, like with Bastion of the Penitent, we can revisit an old concept or character and continue or resolve that story. In other cases, we leave it be, since we don't have the time or resources to do it justice. The Wizard's Tower is a fan favorite, and we talk about the possibility of going there someday with the same excitement we do any other potential idea. Some ideas get made and others don't. So keep letting us know what interests you, and we'll see what happens. Oh, the way he's phrased this, it's like they could be doing something with the Wizard's Tower, but they might not. The amazing thing about the Wizard's Tower as well is there's so many different types of content that could be. That could be Living World. That could be core expansion story. That could be raid content. That could, hell, even fit in a fractal, like the building of the Wizard's Tower could be a fractal, for example. There's so many, like, teams that could take control of that, and I wonder which one will win out in the end, or has won out. But yeah, so that's the most we got on the Wizard's Tower. Malik's Pale Tree was the next one. After hoping to discover Malik's Pale Tree as we went deeper into the jungle during Heart of Thorns events, it was a huge disappointment for not yet meeting or at least hinting the other Pale Tree and other Sylvari like Malik. Why was this important lore even cut? And the OP here is asking a question that's been answered to great detail from Matthew Medina several times in the past. And I think Scott McGough's talked about this at length in the past. So I really don't think this needed a response at all. Bobby did go back and do it anyway. And he said the lore itself was not cut. That lore still exists, but the storyline that explored Malik's origins was cut from Heart of Thorns for scoping reasons. We simply didn't have the time to do it justice. Now, what's interesting about Bobby's response here is this was isolated and turned into a Reddit thread, which actually got a lot of discussion and upvotes, which is amazing to me because, like, this response Bobby's given is a nice response, but we have a much fuller picture than just this, like, couple of sentences he's given it. I don't know how this was news to anyone. And it gives a kind of a weird impression. We've known for a long time that when Bobby says it was cut, he doesn't mean they built a ton of stuff and then removed it. I'm pretty sure what Matthew said before was that early on, that was one of their initial ideas, but later they realized they didn't want too many things to distract us from that urgency getting towards Morgemoth, and then it was cut away. So yeah, a bit of old news to me there, but maybe new to some of you guys. Next, another one from Alga. Has the gods truly departed and left us forever? Will we ever see or meet the gods again, as if they will return to Tyrion once again? Where did they go to? Why did they leave? Blah, blah, blah. Bobby takes the time to say the answer, at least from the gods' point of view, was given in Path of Fire. Have we truly seen the last of them? Only time will tell. So, This is kind of interesting because right as I record this video on Twitch, I've been streaming some very deep analysis and lore speculation discussion, play-by-play of the Path of Fire story, and I've just done the God Library, so this is all very fresh in my mind, what Cormyr said about why the gods left and whatnot. And I don't know whether I really agree the gods were ever clear about why they left. They said that they left Tyrion because the battling over the Elder Dragons could only ever lead to destruction. But why they also left the Mists, and what that even means to exit the Mists, what they exited the universe, how they did that, where they get, all of that is very much still a mystery. What I think we really should take away from Bobby's comment here though is that have we truly seen the last of them? Only time will tell. I really believe we haven't. They may still be de-emphasized in Guild Wars 2 compared to Guild Wars 1, and that's fine, but I really don't think we've seen the last of them. I think we have Menzies lore coming up, or Mingus, however you like to pronounce it. I think we've probably got stuff to do with Lissa, and we may even have stuff returning with more underworld action in upcoming raids. I'm sure there's a lot more god stuff coming up in the scope, and I'm pretty excited for it. 2 more responses before we move on to some other news. Who came first, the Asura or the humans? This is probably one of the most hard and fast answers we get, so good job to Bobby here for giving this to us. The question says, we know that the Asura appear on the surface in the year 1078 after the Exodus. We also know that the gods brought to the humans to Tyria in 786 before the Exodus. Were the Asura, though, already around in Tyria at that point? It's a great question. You know, we hear about the humans being aliens, which could potentially mean that the Norn are older and more native, that the Char are older and more native, and even the Asura. And so, what do we hear from Bobby? General consensus with the ArenaNet Lore Brain Trust is that the Asura were here first. So there you go. I love that thought, man. I really want... Next time the devs feel inspired to talk about the Asura, I don't want them to do Inquest. I want them to do underground Asura stuff. That stuff's always so cool. I want to hear more about their old lives in the thousands of years that they were subterranean only. It's so fascinating to me. Also, apparently there's an ArenaNet Lore Brain Trust. I wonder who's in that. Okay, and then finally, we have what happened to the Gargoyles from Ill-Conceived Was Nah. It must be referencing a Guild Wars 1 naming convention for ritualist skills. Who says, what happened to the Gargoyles? According to the wiki, blah, 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 blah. Also see Wood and Potatoes mystery on it. And so Bobby says this. He says, the short answer is that the Gargoyles weren't included in Guild Wars 2 for scoping and or artistic reasons, not for lore or story ones. That a character in the game references their disappearance is mostly acknowledging that someone in the world is aware of their absence, but that character doesn't know what happened. Unless we have a definitive story reason for answering this question in game content, it's a topic best left up to player speculation. I would hate to close the door on ever again using Gargoyles simply because we made up a lore answer to justify a scoping decision. So, sadly, Bobby doesn't really add too much here. We've already heard from the devs before that they were cut for scoping reasons. What was actually interesting about the Gargoyles was that then they were reused for Halloween, that they've now also been reused in some peculiar places in Path of Fire. But what really caught fire with this was, with the novels, they had timelines of extremely important events in Guild Wars' history. You know, really big stuff like the stirring of the Elder Dragons, the sinking of Lion's Arch and whatnot. And very oddly, back in like 2010 or 11, whenever Ghost of Ascalon came out, they dedicated a part of the timeline to say the Gargoyles have disappeared. So it was like they were suggesting they had an idea for a big story to justify the scoping issues. And it was more than met the eye because they'd even gone so far as doing it in the timeline. Bobby doesn't touch on any of that. It's probably not fresh in his mind. But there you go, guys. So that's just some added detail from the AFC that I was pretty happy to see they took the time to go in and put down there. Moving on to some other stuff entirely, but staying with the forums. And it's going to feel like I'm being criminally short about this now. But Ben over on the World vs. World forums actually had a question for the community. So this happened perhaps 2 or 3 days ago. There's already, I believe, like 12 to 15 pages of discussion before I even got to it. But Ben says this, World vs. World people sit up and pay attention. Hey everyone, we're currently looking to make some Siege revisions. We'd like your feedback. I know several posts have been made in the past, but we'd like to get the feedback in one thread for review. So, one note on our part. Siege should continue to be an important part of World vs. World. We don't want to make a change that would make Siege useless. So let us know on your thoughts on the current state of Siege and what you'd like to see differently. So, there's a lot we can go into here. Number one, I find it interesting that they're making changes to just Siege in general. This has always been a very difficult thing for World vs. World because you get some servers, some guilds, in the future I guess even some alliances that very much enjoy playing with Siege, others that don't at all. Some people seem to appreciate that World vs. World is about asymmetry and Siege really plays and builds into that. Others just find it attacks on their gameplay, find it uninteresting. It really comes down to your personal preference, I think, and I'm not sure where the current 2018 World vs. World community sits because I haven't been engaged with World vs. World very much in the past. Oh, I don't know, since Path of Fire came out, really, and I was working for Pips on Warbringer shortly before. So where everyone feels about Siege right now has always been under contention. Maybe people are a little bit happier with it now, but they're looking for feedback. The other side of this I find really interesting is Ben gives so little direction to the discussion here. It's basically just like, yeah, let's talk about Siege. The only thing we're not going to do is just remove it completely. So what kind of stuff should the community be talking about? Particular balance differences in the minutiae of how powerful some Siege is compared to other and how much some is utilized versus other. New types of Siege that people want to see altogether. Siege people want to see deleted. I don't know, really. Hopefully they find something worthwhile in the whirlpool of feedback that they've generated already. I'll put a link in the description to that. Any massive World vs. World enthusiasts, you can click that, join in on the discussion, but also do me a favor, and as always, leave a comment about the World vs. World side of stuff in your estimation with Siege, because I'm kind of reliant on you guys to keep in the loop on that for myself too. I wonder how drastic the devs are thinking of going as far as World vs. World Siege is concerned, and maybe this is something to look forward to while waiting for the ever on the horizon Alliance update that's somewhere out there. Next topic of news still is on the forums. It's to do with the Deadeye update. So, if you guys have been watching my channel closely, you'll remember that there was a big Deadeye update with recent balance that I did a video on their initial blog post announcing it, and we speculated a bit what it might be like. We did a video on the general balance and skirted around the Deadeye, and I said I wanted to do a proper video on the Deadeye afterwards for you guys. Well, I still haven't really had time to look at or play the Elite specialization since it was updated, but one thing was very clear quickly after the post, and that's that people didn't like it. So now, a few days later, I'm scratching my head on whether I really want to get to grips with Deadeye to figure out exactly what's so broken about it, a bit like we did with Power Engineer before. But it seems there's already movement for more updates. The dust is settling on the forums, and Robert G quickly came back with this response to some community feedback. I won't read out the feedback itself because these are long-ass walls of text, but as far as I can see, one of the things people really don't like is one of the new traits, Silent Scope, which is that you stealth as you dodge, and Deadeyes are kind of needing to use dodges aggressively now because it's that dodge stealth that gives you your malice bursts, and this has been kind of clunky for a whole ton of reasons. Anyway, as I say, I haven't played it or understand it well enough, so I'm a little bit out of my depth, but here's what Robert says. He says, hey, thanks for the thoughtful and well-formatted feedback. I wasn't sure if I should post again after my last thanks for the feedback post had been misinterpreted, but I wanted to give it one more shot since I thought some of these ideas were pretty cool. This is so funny. You can see how the balance team are like so hounded out the second they speak up, and then people wonder why they don't talk anymore. Anyway, so he says, first things first. We are planning to move the stealth application on the Silent Scope trait from the start of the dodge roll to the end. There are pros and cons to each version, so I want to explain this reasoning. We originally put the stealth at the beginning of the dodge to make it more responsive and to give a sneaky feel by hiding in the direction of your roll. However, given problems some players are having with being revealed by bullets in flight, we've decided to move it to the end. This should make the moment-to-moment gameplay with rifles feel smoother and more intuitive. We are also removing the in-combat restriction from the trait. So yeah, I haven't fully played Deadeye. I at least know what the trait change was. And yeah, it's every time you dodge, you get stealth. And I can imagine now, if you're shooting with a rifle, it's in transit as you execute the stealth. You immediately lose the stealth because you reveal yourself, which sucks. That could have worked with any other specialization, really, as long as it was a melee set. But this is the Deadeye that's got the rifle, so yeah, I can understand that. And also that trait only worked while in combat, so you couldn't use that to sneak up on people with that being working out of combat. That sounds like at least a big start of the solution. He also says, moving forward from here, you'll see this change in an update coming in a few weeks. I think we'd all like that to happen a lot sooner, but our team doesn't control the update cycle, and we'd need to wait for other changes in the update to be implemented, tested, etc. While this doesn't address all of the feedback we've seen so far, it was the one we were able to ship in the shortest amount of time. We will continue to follow up as necessary, so please continue to leave your feedback on the forums. And I'm starting to gain confidence that they will follow up. You'll notice that they do keep following up, and look at the way they've handled the druid nerfs, right? Like, they followed up, and then they followed up, and then they followed up, and they followed up. So if they do something similar after the Deadeye overhaul, hopefully we'll see some movement. I mean, I say that, but then after the Mesmer overhaul, they didn't follow up very much with the nerfs. Let's just hope they do with the buffs on the Deadeye or whatever. Almost to the end now. Back over to Reddit for a final salvo of dev comments, this time from ArenaNet Ben. Wow, so much communication, and on the topic of fractals. So we know what this is about. It's to do with instabilities. It's to do with their test of making instabilities feel like they would swap on a weekly basis. And there was another thread about it, to which, right as I'm making this video, really, 20 minutes ago was his last post, ArenaNet Ben is talking about what's upcoming for instabilities. So he says this here: we have plans to make the system rotate daily instead of weekly with the release of the very next fractal. And by the way, guys, I'm guessing that's going to be next big release. They'll probably announce another Living World release, and we'll hopefully get a fractal with that. He says, after that, I have a short-term goal to spend some time reworking instabilities and building new ones based on collected feedback thus far. I'm really excited about that. Most people seem to think of instabilities as just nuisances. I like the way that they change up gameplay, and I'm really looking forward to see what Ben does with a new set. So yeah, that's the roadmap for fractals. New fractal plus the daily rotation, and then new instabilities afterwards. That's great. Someone else even says a little bit of what I was saying here. Victor, instabilities always seem to be a topic discussed in a negative manner when talking about fractals. Have you ever thought about trying to design some double-edged ones in an attempt to make them more fun? Ones that both benefits to the party and a downside to the party. An easy example, but probably not a good one, would be like no pain, no gain into an effect that also applies to the party as well as the enemies. And Ben, happily, I was really happy to see this, says this is exactly the line of thinking I am most leaning towards. So, yeah, really, I'm also thinking like nature spirits from Guild Wars 1 that rangers would summon, where it would be like a big effect that would affect both enemies and allies, and you'd all kind of have to work under the new scenario, and then you could sort of build into them with that changing daily. That could be really fun. There was even, on top of this, a little bit of talk about social awkwardness. So we all know social awkwardness, standing near people, you get hurt, so it teaches you to have very precise positioning. In some ways, punishes stacking together, despite the fact so much of Guild Wars incentivizes you to do that. Ben, for a long time, has said, look, it might need to go. And so he says here, social awkwardness is pretty consistently viewed negatively in feedback, so you can expect some major changes to it if it stays at all. As for symbols, I would like to do what I can to make things more clear. I think ideally fewer instabilities would have AoE components, since those kinds of instabilities inherently are going to combo bad with AoE heavy fractals. So yeah, if you have a really AoE heavy fractal and then two different instabilities on you that also produce AoEs, it's going to look a little bit nuts. So it really does look like social awkwardness is up for the chopping blocks. I don't think everything about social awkwardness is bad, but and I think social awkwardness could even be really good if it was quite rare. If it was just one in a big pile of instabilities on daily rotation, such that you saw it very infrequently, I think social awkwardness works fine. But that's not how it's actually structured at the moment, and in fact it was deliberately structured that T4s, it was always there, right? So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. It looks like a lot of movement will be going on with that on the fractals end. So that's it, guys. That's the main news. That's you all caught up for the past fortnight or so. Lots to talk about, and of course we're probably on the brink of some kind of trailer or information dump from episode 3. That's also not to mention E3, where people are expecting something going on from ArenaNet, as they do have a booth. I'm still wondering about that myself. It might not even be a Guild Wars related thing. We could do a dedicated video on that topic as it gets a little bit closer. I will close out the video as well. This will be one of my last opportunities to talk about it by letting you guys know about the Tyrion Tarot card campaign. You've probably already heard of it by now, but in case you didn't, this is right their last day. If you don't know, a huge collection of artists enthusiastic about Guild Wars 2 have been sponsored by ArenaNet to create a deck of Tyrion-themed tarot cards that is actually supported and collaborated with ArenaNet themselves. So here's a post they put out. Come check out Tyrion Tarot. This is our final call out for the campaign. The project will be shutting its door to new pledges tomorrow after my video goes up here. They say, for those unfamiliar, this ArenaNet-sponsored collaboration by the Guild Wars 2 Artist Collective consists of 68 artists, 2 writers, 2 editors, and a cosplayer that have come together to create a fully functional tarot card deck, selling for charity, as many have mentioned. You don't need a full understanding of tarot to use them. Many use them as standard playing deck cards, but you can also just get a deck to appreciate the lore and art and support a good cause. This is a limited run project and we won't be selling it ever again. In addition, all add-on items such as the pins and stickers are ArenaNet approved. They are only available through this campaign. So yeah, you get like this huge deck of gilded cards on like really classy paper and things, I guess. It looks pretty exciting. I personally haven't pledged just yet, but I might be convinced in the last 24 hours. They've hit basically every stretch goal I think that they went for, which means that it's really become quite a big bundle. They've raised over $120,000. That's the kind of pool the community's got at the moment, and that's fantastic. And yeah, if you guys want to get in on it, time is very quickly running out. So there you have it, guys. There will be a link to that in the description, a link to the Guild Wars 1 news video I did as well, and until next time, I'll see you very shortly.